Hello and welcome to all of you present here. Children, today we will discuss the chapter 5 of history, and the name of the chapter is Kingdoms, Kings and Early Republic. So it will be very interesting chapter for all of us, and we will try to know that how did about 3000 years ago people started to become kings or rulers. So let me have a literal meaning of these three terms. Kingdoms means the area, the defined area uh, under which a king, a ruler has his control on its subjects is known as a kingdom. तो वो बहुत बड़ा इलाका है, वो बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र जिसके अंदर रहने वाले सभी प्रजा पर किसी शासक का नियंत्रण होता है, तो वो उसका किंगडम का. And kings, you already know, it is known as the rulers. And early republic. Early republic means such types of kingdom where the ruler was chosen by the people. As we know that rulers were used to be govern the state or the kingdom by virtue of being taking birth in the king house or king family. So we already know that it was general tradition that the elder son of the king was declared the successor of the king, or he used to be the next king. So we will try to know all these facts, that how did 3000 years ago people started to become king. In this chapter we will try to know the contents, that how some men became rulers, what was the system of becoming rulers, what is the meaning of Janapadas, what is the meaning of Mahajanapadas, and if Janapadas and Mahajanapadas were in a form of a small kingdom, then how the taxes were collected by the kings, what were the different sources of the taxes, and then change in agriculture system. That was also a very historical event. Actually, agriculture was the main occupation of the people living in those period of time. But how agriculture saw or witness a change, we will discuss it. Then we will have a closer look on to Mahajanpad, Magad and Vachi, that where these Mahajanpad were situated and who were prominent kings of this Mahajanpad. So one by one we will try to know it. And learning outcomes mean what will be the learning out to the students. Students will be able to differentiate the ways through which kings were chosen during Vedic period and the present days. So today also we choose our rulers, but the system is very different. In democratic system we choose our ruler through the voting system, but this system was not being followed 3000 years back in our subcontinent India. Now after that the students will be able to differentiate between different Varna systems, and who were those belonging to those Varnashram system. And then the students will be able to define Janpadas and Mahajanpads, and lastly they will have some idea about the Mahajanpads, Magad and Vachi. So now it is time to begin our chapter. So first of all, we will try to know how some men became a ruler about 3000 years ago. So it is our utmost task to know that how did people used to become ruler 3000 years back. We have already studied in the earlier chapter that 4 Vedas were written, and the earliest Veda was the Rig Veda, and it was composed about 3700 years ago. And after that 3 other Vedas were also composed. So all the historical knowledge we gain during Vedic period, it is through the Vedas. So here our task is to know how the ruler or the kings were chosen 3000 years back. Now if I ask you that how the rulers are chosen in present day, or how the prime ministers are chosen in India since independence, what will you reply? You will say that okay, whether it is prime minister, whether it is chief minister, all are chosen through the voting system, because in democratic system, the rulers are chosen by the people. People themselves choose their ruler. Nobody becomes ruler by himself, or nobody becomes ruler only due to virtue of taking birth in a royal family or in a rich family. To become a ruler, you have to fight an election, and if the people cast votes in favor of you, if the largest number of people support you in the country, then you will become the ruler. But was the system being followed in the same way 3000 years ago in Indian subcontinent? Whether the rulers were chosen in the same manner as we choose today? No, it was quite different. So let us try to know. Raja or king, the word is, you might be familiar with it. It is not new to you. Initially, Raja were chosen by generals. So in previous chapter, we have discussed that the Raja were chosen by generals. But around 3000 years ago, there were changes in way in which Raja were chosen. So 3000 years back, 3000 साल पहले राजा बनने की सिस्टम में कुछ परिवर्तन आया. Some men now became recognized as Raja by making some big sacrifices. What was the main change, or what was the peculiar system for becoming a king? Around 3000 years back in Indian subcontinent, the people used to become king by performing big sacrifices. Big sacrifices means there used to be organization of a big yagya, and in yagya the sacrifice mean hota hai bali dena. So there was the sacrifice of the horse. So that is why that yagya was known as the ASHWAMEDHA. Ashwa matlab ghoda, and yagya matlab rituals in which the expert priest chants the Vedic mantras. So 3000 years ago, some people, or the system of becoming king was to perform big sacrifices or organize a Ashwamedha. And one such sacrifice was the Ashwamedha, or the horse sacrifice. So what was the meaning of Ashwamedha? Why did it was going to be organized by the earliest people to become the king? And what were some rituals which were performed there? We will discuss here. Now here you see such types of rituals were performed, and many learned priests used to sit around the Yagasala, and even the king and queen used to sit there. And during this Ashwamedha, the king used to be the prominent figure. He has to perform very much rituals, and sacred waters were sprinkled on his body, and it was supposed to be performance of the Ashwamedha. But the question arises, why did king used to organize Ashwamedha, and how it was going to be the system of becoming a king? Let us see. A horse is let loose to wander freely into other kingdoms. So Ashwamedha Yag was such types of yag in which a horse was let loose to wander in other kingdoms. Let us see what was its results. Ashwamedha. A horse was let loose to wander freely, and it was guarded by the king's men. So whenever a person wanted to become a very famous king or very Chakravarti Raja like, then he had to organize a Ashwamedha. And in Ashwamedha, what used to be the tradition? A horse was let loose to wander into the kingdoms of other kings. If the horse was stopped by the other kingdom's king, it was meant that that king is no longer ready to accept the subjugation of the king who had organized the Ashwamedha, and he had to fight with the king who had organized the Ashwamedha, and then it was going to be the deciding factor that who will become the king. So in Ashwamedha, what was the tradition? If somebody wanted to become king, or if somebody wanted to win over the neighboring kingdoms, There was no need to fight in advance to kill the animals. First of all, an Ashwamedh Yagya was organized in which a horse was let loose to pass through the kingdoms of other kings. And if any Raja or any king stopped the horse of Ashwamedh Yagya, it was meant that he is challenging the Raja who is performing the Ashwamedh Yagya. If the king allowed to pass the horse through his kingdom, it was assumed that he has accepted the strength of or the supremacy of the Raja who has organized the Ashwamedh Yagya, and there used to be no any fight. But if any king stopped the horse of Ashwamedh Yagya, then it was supposed that he is challenging the Raja who is performing the Ashwamedh Yagya, and he has to fight to prove his strength. And if he won, then it was assumed that he will be the governing and ruling the whole area. Or otherwise, if you used to get defeated, then the Raja who had organized the Ashwamedh will make substitution of his kingdom and rule over that area. तो इस अश्वमेध यज्ञ में होता क्या था कि जो राजा अश्वमेध यज्ञ करता था वो इसके द्वारा एक घोड़ा छोड़ा जाता था और वो घोड़ा दूसरे राज्यों के जमीन से होकर गुजरता था। अगर किसी भी राजा ने उस घोड़े को रोक दिया, किसी दूसरे राज्य के राजा ने, तो ये मान लिया जाता था कि वो अश्वमेध यज्ञ कराने वाले राजा को चैलेंज दे रहा है, चुनौती कर रहा है, वो उसकी हार स्वीकार नहीं कर रहा है और फिर उसे अपने शक्ति को प्रूफ करने के लिए अश्वमेध करने वाले राजा के साथ युद्ध करना पड़ता था। और अगर वो घोड़े को चुपचाप जाने देता था तो ये मान लिया जाता था कि उसने हार स्वीकार कर ली है और वो जो अश्वमेध यज्ञ करा रहे राजा उसकी अधीनता उसे स्वीकार। सो what does we come to know that Ashwamedh Yagya was performed to become a ruler of a very big kingdom, large kingdom, and in this a horse was let loose to pass through the kingdoms of other kings, and if any king stopped it, it was assumed that he is challenging the king who is performing the Ashwamedh Yagya, and he has to fight with the king who had organized the Ashwamedh Yagya. And if they allowed to pass through the king, the horse through their kingdom, it was assumed that they have accepted the strength of the king who has performing the Ashwamedh Yagya. Here, chariots you may see in those period of time, the king used to go into the battlefield sitting on the chariots. Ashwamedh Yagya, the Raja who surrendered were then invited to the sacrifice. So those kings who did not stop the horse and accepted the supremacy of the king who had organized the Ashwamedh Yagya, they were invited in the Ashwamedh Yagya or the sacrifice. The ritual was performed by highly trained priests who were rewarded with gifts. So organizing Ashwamedh was not a very simple task. It was a very work in which huge expenditure occurred. So many rituals were performed, and it was performed by the highly trained priest. अश्वमेध यज्ञ जो था वो बहुत बड़ा यज्ञ होता था, उसमें बहुत धन खर्च होता था और बहुत से धार्मिक अनुष्ठान होते थे और उसमें बहुत से विद्वान पुजारी ही इस यज्ञ को करवा सकते थे. The act of performing was considered very powerful, and the Raja performing it was respected and given gifts by the surrendering Raja. तो जब भी यह अश्वमेध यज्ञ कोई राजा करवाता था तो जिन जिन प्रदेशों के राजा अपने क्षेत्र से घोड़े को जाने देते थे, उसकी अधीनता स्वीकार कर लेते थे, उन सारे लोगों को यज्ञ में आमंत्रित किया जाता था और उन्हें भी गिफ्ट दिया जाता था जो कि सरेंडर कर देते. इस तरह से आप देख सकते हैं कि राजा किस तरह से मतलब लोगों को सम्मानित कर रहे हैं, ऋषि को सम्मानित कर रहे हैं जो परफॉर्म करवा रहे हैं. Descriptions of the Ashwamedh. The Raja was the center. Whenever the Ashwamedh was used to be organized, who was going to be a central figure? Who was the prominent one? It was going to be the king. जब कभी भी यज्ञ होता था तो उसमें सबसे प्रमुख व्यक्ति राजा ही होता था. He had a special seat, a throne, a tiger skin. वो एक स्पेशल सीट पर, एक विशेष स्थान पर, एक विशेष जगह पर, एक विशेष आसन पर बैठता था. चाहे वो गद्दी, राजगद्दी हो सकती है या बाघ का छाल हो सकता है. His charioteer was with his companion in the battlefield. उसके साथ जो चैरियोटर होता था, माने जो उसका रथ खींचने वाला सारथी होता था, वो भी यज्ञ में राजा के साथ. Raja's relative, especially wives and sons, had to perform many minor rituals. यज्ञ में राजा के पुत्र और रानी को भी बहुत सारे धार्मिक अनुष्ठान करने पड़ते थे और उन्हें भी यज्ञ में उपस्थित रहना पड़ता। The other rajas who simply spectators who sat and watched the performance of the sacrifice. So those kings who had already surrendered, the king before the king who had organized the Ashwamedh yagya were also invited, and they will be sitting there and being watching the all performance of the sacrifices. And priest perform the rituals, also sprinkle sacred water on the raja. तो priest जो थे, पुजारी थे, वो सारे मतलब धार्मिक कार्यक्रम कराते थे और राजा के ऊपर पवित्र जल भी छिड़कते थे। इस तरह से देख सकते हैं कि किस तरह से यज्ञ होता था। Later Vedic books. Here one thing is also left. Some people regarded the ordinary people, the Vish or Vash were also gifted. So whenever there used to be the organization of Ashwamedh, general people, ordinary people of the kingdom were also invited to see the yagya, and the Vish or Vash also used to bring the gifts from the king. Some people regarded as Sudra by the priest were excluded from many rituals. So those people who were regarded as Sudra were not allowed to sit in the yagya, and they were not allowed to perform few rituals. Later Vedic books. In this period, many books were composed in North India, especially in the areas drained by the Ganga area. So you already know that in last chapter we had discussed that it were the Aryans who had written the Vedas, and first of all the Rig Veda was composed, and after that other Vedas were composed and other books were also composed. And first of all Aryans had settled in Indus and Vyas rivers area. Later on they moved forward and settled themselves in the Ganga and Yamuna river area. So these books were often called later Vedic because they were composed after the Rig Veda. So the Aryans first of all composed the Rig Veda 3700 years ago, and after that other Vedas were composed. That is why they are known as the later Vedic, later Vedas, because बाद later माने होता है बाद की पुस्तकें. These books included the Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Athar Veda. So there were 4 Vedas, but the first Veda was going to be the Rig Veda, and after that 3 other Vedas were composed: Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Athar Veda. And you already know there were used to be hymns and uktiya in the Vedas, and it was written, composed in the Sanskrit, and it was Vedic Sanskrit that was very much different from the today's Sanskrit. And these Vedas were composed by the priest, describes how rituals were to be performed, and also contained rules about society. So in these Vedas, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda, many rituals, how the rituals were to be performed during yagya periods or yagya, and how the rules should be followed in the society. Society and Varnas. There were several different groups in the society: priests, warriors, craftsperson, laborers, farmers, herders, traders, fishing folks, and forest people. So in those time of period when the Vedas were composed, there were different kinds of people living in the society. Priest मतलब पुजारी भी थे, warrior मतलब योद्धा भी थे, क्राफ्ट पर्सन में कारीगर भी थे, लेबर मतलब मजदूर भी रहते थे, फार्मर में किसान भी रहते थे, हर्डर में चरवाहे भी रहते थे, ट्रेडर्स में व्यापारी भी रहते थे, मछली पालन वाले करने भी रहते थे, और जंगल में रहने वाले भी रहते थे. सम वेयर रिच एंड सम वेयर, कुछ समाज में रहने वाले लोग धनी होते थे और कुछ गरीब थे. Society and the Varnas. There were several different groups in the societies we have just discussed. They may be priests, warriors, craftspersons, laborers, farmers, herders, traders, fishing folk, and forest people. Some were rich and some were. Priests divided the people into 4 groups called Varnas: Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaisya, and Sudras. Each Varna had a different set of functions. So we come to know that in the society different kinds of people used to live, and they had different, they were engaged themselves in different occupation for their livelihood. जीने के लिए अलग अलग काम करते थे. कोई पुजारी का काम करता था, कोई योद्धा का काम करता था, कोई कारीगरी का काम करता था, कोई मजदूर का काम करता था, और जितने भी तरह के लोग समाज में थे उनको 4 वर्ण में बांटा गया था पुजारियों के द्वारा. एक को ब्राह्मण्स कहते थे, दूसरे को क्षत्रिय, तीसरे को वैश्य और चौथे को शूद्र. Brahmins. expected to study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices, were presented gifts. तो ब्राह्मण उनको कहते थे जो शिक्षण का काम करते थे, वेद पाठ करते थे, वेद के बारे में ज्ञान देते थे, यज्ञ करवाते थे, धार्मिक अनुष्ठान करवाते थे और उन्हें लोग दान भी देते थे. क्षत्रियस, दे वेयर द रूलर्स, जो शासक वर्ग था, जो शासन करने वाले लोग थे, उनको रूलर्स कहते थे. दे वेयर एक्सपेक्टेड टू फाइट बैटल्स एंड प्रोटेक्ट पीपुल, ये उस तरह के लोग होते थे जिनको युद्ध में भाग लेना पड़ता था, युद्ध करना पड़ता था और अपनी जनता की रक्षा करनी पड़ती थी. और यही लोग यज्ञ भी कराते थे. दे कुड परफॉर्म सैक्रिफाइसेस. विश और वैश्य, they were expected to be farmers, herders, traders, they could perform sacrifices. तो समाज में जो तीसरा वर्ण था वो उसमें किसान भी आते थे, पशुपालक भी आते थे, व्यापारी भी आते थे. तो फार्मर, हर्डर्स और ट्रेडर्स को मिला करके विश या वैश्य करते थे और ये भी धार्मिक अनुष्ठानों में भाग ले सकते थे, यज्ञ करवा सकते थे. शूद्रास, they had to serve the other three groups. ये शूद्र जो वर्ण था इनको अन्य तीनों वर्णों की सेवा करनी होती थी. वुमेन वेर ऑल्सो ग्रुप्ड विद शूद्र, महिलाओं को भी शूद्र के साथ ही रखा जाता था, उनकी कैटेगरी में रखा जाता था. दे कुड नॉट परफॉर्म एनी रिचुअल्स, ये कोई धार्मिक अनुष्ठान नहीं कर सकते थे. शूद्रस एंड वीमेन वे आर नॉट अलाउड टू स्टडी द वेदास. तो उस समय में आज से 3000 ईयर्स से बैक में इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट में शूद्र वर्ण के लोग और महिलाओं को वेद पढ़ने की मनाही थी. वर्णास इन डिटेल, तो ये वर्णाश्रम सिस्टम क्या है इसको थोड़ा डिटेल में देखते हैं. दीज वर्णस वे डिसाइडेड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ बर्थ. तो लेटर वैदिक पीरियड में जब चारों वेदों की रचना हो गई तब लोगों का जो वर्ण था, उनका जो कैटेगरी था समाज में, अब वो जन्म के आधार पर निश्चित होने लगा. पहले उनके काम के आधार पर था लेकिन अब जन्म के आधार पर होने लगा. द चाइल्ड ऑफ ए क्षत्रिय विल ऑटोमेटिकली बिकम ए क्षत्रिय एंड सो. तो क्षत्रिय के घर में जन्मने वाला बच्चा ऑटोमेटिक क्षत्रिय बन जाता था, ब्राह्मण के घर में जन्मने वाला बच्चा ऑटोमेटिक ब्राह्मण बन जाता था. इट वॉज द सिचुएशन इन सोसाइटी ड्यूरिंग around 3000 years ago. Later some people were classified and untouchable. Society में बाद में चलकर कुछ लोगों को untouchable भी कहा जाने लगा. These included some craft persons, hunter gatherers and people who helped perform burials and cremations. समाज में कुछ लोगों को अछूत भी माना जाने लगा. इसमें कुछ कारीगर भी आते थे, कुछ हंटर गैदरर भी आते थे और कुछ लोग ऐसे भी आते थे जो शमशान भूमि में रहते थे और शमशान के कार्यों में संलग्न रहते थे. It was believed that कॉन्टैक्ट्स विद दिस ग्रुप्स वर फॉलोड. समाज में ऐसी धारणा प्रचलित हो गई थी कि अगर अनटचेबल से टच कर जाएंगे हम, अछूतों से अगर हमारा टच हो जाएगा तो हम मतलब अशुद्ध हो जाएंगे. These were the untouchables who used to live the outskirts of the village. Village के बाहरी क्षेत्रों में ये लोग रहते. Acceptance of the Varnas. Many people did not accept this word system. समाज में रहने वाले बहुत सारे लोगों ने इस वर्ण सिस्टम को नहीं माना. Some kings thought they were superior to the rest. कुछ राजा सोचते थे, क्षत्रिय सोचते थे कि वो पुजारी से बड़े. अदर थॉट्स दैट बर्थ कुड नॉट बी द बेसिस ऑफ क्लास. कुछ लोगों का मानना था कि केवल जन्म के आधार पर ही आप उस वर्ण के व्यक्ति हो गए, ये मानना सही नहीं है. एनीबडी टेकिंग बर्थ इन एनी वर्ना may perform, may do the job of other varna and become superior. तो आप किसी भी वर्ण में जन्म ले, जन्म के लेने आधार पर आप वर्ण उस वर्ण के नहीं हो सकते हैं, अपने कर्म के आधार पर हो सकते हैं, ऐसा कुछ लोगों का मानना था. Some people felt that there should be no difference based on occupation. कुछ लोगों का मानना था कि समाज में जो वर्णाश्रम सिस्टम ये ठीक नहीं है, जीविका जीने का अलग लोगों का ढंग है, अलग अलग तरीका है, अब उसके लिए वर्ण बनाने की जरूरत नहीं. Some felt that everyone should be able to perform rituals. कुछ लोगों का मानना था कि सभी लोगों को धार्मिक अनुष्ठान में भाग लेने का और पूजा पाठ कराने का और यज्ञ कराने का अधिकार होना चाहिए. Some condemned the practice of untouchability. कुछ लोग समाज में जो अनटचेबिलिटी थी, छुआछूत की जो भावना थी, उसे पसंद. There were some areas like the northeast where social and economical differences were not very sharp. नॉर्थ ईस्ट इंडिया में जहां आजकल असम, मणिपुर, त्रिपुरा ये सब स्टेट्स आते हैं, वहां पर सोशल डिफरेंस इस तरह का वर्णा सिस्टम उतना प्रचलित नहीं था. जनपद. So what is the meaning of janpad? We will discuss here. In previous chapter we have discussed that Raja, who was going to be the Raja, leader of Jan. Now in around 3000 years, who was the Raja? Ruler of the Janpads. So 3700 years ago, during Rig Vedic period, the Raja used to be the leader of Jan. जो कबीले के रूप में लोग रहते थे, और उनके हेड में से, उनके बीच से ही कोई राजा बनता था। और जब 3000 ईयर्स से वो समय आया तो जनपद के हेड को राजा करते। तो ये जनपद क्या था? स्मॉल किंगडम होता था, उसे जनपद कहते थे। जनपद लिटरल मीनिंग लैंड वेयर द जनस सेट देयर फुट एंड सेटल डाउन। जन माने लोग, पद माने पैर, तो लैंड वेयर द जनस सेट देयर फुट एंड सेटल। व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ जनपद? लैंड वेयर द जन और द पीपल सेट देयर फुट एंड सेटल डाउन। जहां पर जन लोग अपना पैर रखे और बस गए, वही एरिया जनपद कहलाया। जनपद मीने स्मॉल किंगडम। In book you may see there were 16 Mahajanpads later on. So archaeologists sites excavation and findings. Archaeologists excavated a number of settlements of these janpads. Purana Kila in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, and Atranji Khera near Etah, UP. So many janpads knowledge has been found due to help of archaeologists, and archaeologists excavated 3 sites. First, Purana Kila in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, second place, and third, Atranji Khera near Etah, UP. These were the 3 places where Janpadas evidence has been found. तो जनपद का यहाँ पर प्रमाण मिला है आपका, और यहीं पर मतलब बहुत सारी इनके बारे में जानकारियां मिली। तो साइट्स आर्कोलॉजिस्ट में फाइंडिंग्स क्या मिला है? पीपुल लिव्ड इन हट्स, जनपद में जो लोग रहते थे झोपड़ियों में रहते थे। किप्ड कैटल एंड अदर एनिमल्स, वो बहुत सारे मवेशी रखते थे और जानवरों भी पालते थे। ग्रीव मेनी क्रॉप्स, बहुत सारे फसलों की खेती करते थे। राइस, बार्ली, सीसेम, मस्टर्ड, व्हीट, पल्स, शुगर केन, तो इस तरह के फसलों की वे खेती भी करते थे। तो पुराना किला आप देख सकते हैं, ये साइट है जहां पर आर्कोलॉजिस्ट लोगों ने जनपद का एग्जाम्पल पाया है, हस्तिनापुर और ये अतरंजी खेरा। प्रिंटेड ग्रेवियर मतलब चित्रित धूसर मृदभांड, तो बर्तन भी बनते थे, उस पर फोटो भी होते थे और भूरे रंग के होते थे, इसलिए इनका नाम पड़ा पेंटेड ग्रेवियर। एक स्पेशल चीजें खुदाई में मिली है जनपदों से, और इसके बारे में भी स्टडी करना है। इस तरह के बर्तन मिलते थे, आप देखते हैं पेंटेड ग्रेवियर। पेंटेड ग्रेवियर, पेंटेड माने की पेंटिंग किया हुआ, चित्र बनाया हुआ, और ग्रे माने भूरे कलर का, वेयर माने बर्तन। तो पेंटेड ग्रेवियर क्या थे? वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट से। अनदर इंपॉर्टेंट फाइंडिंग्स फ्रॉम दिस एक्सकैवेशन आर अर्थन पॉट्स, तो मिट्टी के बर्तन इन जनपदों में मिले हैं, और सम वेयर पेंटेड ग्रे, अदर्स वेयर पेंटेड रेड, तो कुछ ग्रे कलर में होते थे और कुछ रेड कलर में होते थे। ए स्पेशल टाइप ऑफ पॉटरी आल्सो फाउंड पेंटेड ग्रेवियर, तो कुछ स्पेशल तरह के बर्तन मिले जिन्हें पेंटेड ग्रेवियर कह जाते हैं। These grey pots had painted designs, usually simple lines and geometrical pictures, तो ये जो बर्तन होते थे इन पर लाइंस होती थी बने हुए, और ये मतलब ज्योमेट्रिक मैथमेटिक्स की तरह कुछ लाइंस होती थी। एंड एक्सट्रीमली फाइन टू टच विथ ए नाइस स्मूथ सरफेस, ये जो बर्तन होते थे ये छूने में काफी चिकने होते थे, बहुत मतलब उनका सतह जो होता था चिकना होता था। वे आर प्रोबेबली यूज्ड टू ऑन स्पेशल ओकेजन फॉर इम्पोर्टेंट पीपल और टू सर्व स्पेशल फूड, तो विशेष समय में, विशेष त्योहारों के समय में इस बर्तन का यूज होता था, जो कि अतिथियों के लिए भोजन देने के लिए भी यूज होता था। प्लेट्स एंड बाउल्स, तो प्लेट्स की थालियां भी मिली है, कटोरियां भी मिली है। मोस्ट कॉमन पेंटेड ग्रेवियर वेसल्स, तो बहुत तरह के बर्तन मिले, जिसमें सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है पेंटेड ग्रेवियर या अर्थन पॉट्स होते थे। देखिए इस तरह के बर्तन मिले हैं, एंड इट्स क्वाइट द सरफेस वेरी स्मूथ, लाइनिंग इज क्वाइट विजिबल। महाजनपद, so what is the meaning of janpads? Earlier we discussed about janpad were those place where the generals set their food and settle down, तो जहां पर जन लोग अपना पैर रखे और बस गए वही जनपद कहलाया। वो छोटे छोटे राज्य होते थे, उन्हीं छोटे छोटे राज्यों से बड़े होकर जो थोड़ा बड़े बड़े हो गए राज्य वो महाजनपद बने, और ये घटना हुई 2500 ईयर्स। तो इसके बारे में हम लोग नेक्स्ट वीडियो में पढ़ेंगे कि महाजनपद कौन थे, कितने महाजनपद थे और उनका क्या मतलब। Okay.